Imagine a corporate payroll where the guy who plans the Friday office parties makes 2.5 times more money than the chief ethics officer.
Right, yeah.
You'd probably look at that ledger and think, well, the entire company is completely dysfunctional, maybe even headed for collapse.
Oh, absolutely. You'd think they were doomed.
But in the year 1700, in the grandest aristocratic houses of France, that structure wasn't dysfunction at all. It was actually a highly calculated survival strategy.
Yeah, and I think it forces us to completely reevaluate how we picture the past.
Right.
We tend to view history through this really romanticized lens, like lords and ladies drifting through palaces, endless wealth, zero responsibilities.
Like a fairy tale, basically.
Exactly. But underneath that velvet veneer, these estates were massive, incredibly complex, and quite frankly, terrifyingly fragile corporate machines.
Which brings us to our mission for today. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are looking into a management manual, yes, a literal management manual published in 1700 called La Maison Reglée.
Yeah, written by a man named Oettinger.
Right, Oettinger. And we are going to extract the most fascinating nuggets from this 300-year-old playbook to see how a grand aristocratic household actually functioned on like a random Tuesday morning.
It's honestly amazing. We're going to decode the payroll, look at the grueling qualifications for their top executives, and really dig into the extreme paranoia that dictated the daily duties of the staff.
Because you shouldn't frame this as some dry historical document. This is basically the 1700s equivalent of a Silicon Valley corporate playbook.
It really is. And as we dig into the specific roles, especially, the intendant, the secretary, and the frontline staff, you'll start to see that the fundamental challenges of managing human nature, well, they just haven't changed. Oettinger was essentially trying to solve the exact same logistical and human resources nightmares that modern executives face today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we look at who does what, we really need to look at the budget.
Oh, always follow the money.
Exactly. Because where an organization spends its capital is, the purest indicator of what it truly values. And in Chapter 4, Oettinger lays out the specific annual salaries for the entire household.
Yeah, in a currency called livre. And this ledger is, well, it's a beautifully stark map of the estate's priorities.
It really is.
It completely strips away all the polite societal norms and just shows you the raw math of aristocratic power.
So let's look at the top tier. The absolute highest paid employee on the entire estate is the maître d'hôtel.
The master of the household.
Right, the guy who oversees the daily expenses and the dining operations. He pulls in 500 livres a year.
Which is a huge amount.
Massive. And just behind him is the écuyer, the master of the horse, coming in at 400.
Yeah, so he's effectively the logistics and transportation chief, and a highly paid one at that.
But as we move further down the ledger, the priorities start to look a little skewed.
Just a bit.
The secretary and the cook both make 300 livres.
Right.
And then below them, making 200 livres, are the valets of the chamber and the almoner.
The household priest.
Exactly. And then down at the very bottom, you have coachmen making 100, and scullery maids and boys making 75.
It's a remarkably steep pyramid. You have this very concentrated accumulation of wealth at the very top.
And I have a major bone to pick with this structure. Like, I have to push back here on behalf of the 18th century clergy.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
I mean, the almoner is the spiritual guide of the house, right? He is the man literally responsible for the eternal salvation of the Lord and his family.
That's the idea, yeah.
And he makes 200 livres. Meanwhile, the maître d'hôtel is making 500, and the guy cooking the meat is making 300.
Right.
Are we really saying that food and parties were valued more highly than spiritual salvation?
Well, in a purely operational day-to-day sense, yes, they absolutely were.
Wait, really? Just straight up?
Straight up. What's fascinating here is that to understand this, we have to look at the mechanics of power in 1700. In a grand household of this era, incredible hospitality, dining, and outward displays of immense wealth, they weren't just for leisure.
Right, it wasn't just throwing a fun party.
No, not at all. They were the ultimate tools of political and social power. The maître d'hôtel and the cook were responsible for the outward face of the Lord's magnificence.
So it's less about having a nice meal and more like, I don't know, a geopolitical summit masked as a dinner party.
That is a perfect way to frame it. If a lord wanted to maintain his standing at the royal court, or secure a lucrative marriage alliance, or, intimidate a political rival.
He didn't do that with a good sermon.
Exactly. He didn't achieve that by delivering a beautifully written sermon in his private chapel. He achieved it by throwing a breathtaking, flawless banquet.
Wow.
So the maitre d'hotel and the cook, they were the architects of that magnificence. They were directly responsible for generating political capital.
That makes the payroll a ruthlessly pragmatic document, doesn't it?
Mhm.
It's not about rewarding virtue, it's just about political utility.
That's exactly what it is.
The chef, who prepares an exquisite, towering centerpiece, gets 300 livres, because that dinner might secure the lord a royal appointment. The almoner, praying for his soul, gets 200 because, well, salvation doesn't pay the political bills this quarter.
Yeah, the ledger tells you that outward projection of power mattered far more to the survival of the estate than inward piety. The estate needed to project invincibility.
Okay, so looking at this massive web of cooks, coachmen, valets, and priests, I'm trying to figure out how it didn't just evolve into total chaos.
Oh, it was a constant battle.
Because the Lord surely isn't the one down in the kitchens auditing the butcher's receipts, right? So who is the historical equivalent of stressed-out middle manager taking the brunt of all this?
Well, that burden falls squarely on the shoulders of the intendant. We see this in Chapter 6.
The intendant.
Yeah, the intendant is the ultimate CEO of the estate. And without a highly functioning one, the entire operation collapses almost immediately.
And Oettinger gives us incredibly strict qualifications for this role. Like, first off, there are these intense moral clauses. The intendant must be wise and absolutely, under no circumstances, addicted to gambling, women, or wine.
Which is entirely practical, if you think about it.
I guess so, yeah.
Because this person holds the keys to the fortune. If your CEO has a secret gambling debt, your entire estate is suddenly vulnerable to extortion or embezzlement. You just cannot have them compromised.
That part makes total sense.
Yeah.
But then we get to the actual financial duties, and it is exhausting just reading them.
Oh, it's a nightmare job.
The intendant has to hold the purse strings tightly, but Oettinger specifically warns that he cannot be embarrassingly stingy because, again, the estate has to project wealth.
Right, that tricky balance.
And he is required to conduct financial reviews every 8 days. He has to provide detailed monthly reports to the Lord. He keeps registers of every single coin coming in and going out. And he personally monitors the contracts with the butcher, the baker, the grocer.
Yeah, and beyond the sheer accounting of it all, he has major human resources duties. The text explicitly mandates that he must prevent brewery. Yeah, which basically means drama, feuds, or quarrels among the staff.
So he is the CEO, the CFO, and the HR director rolled into one highly stressed individual.
Precisely.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. Oettinger puts a strict age limit on this job.
He does.
He says the intendant must be between 25 and 50 years old, capping the CEO at 50.
Yeah.
Today, 50 is often when corporate executives are just hitting their prime. You know, they have the gravitas, the decades of experience. Why age out your chief executive when they are arguably at their smartest?
Well, you have to picture the sheer physical reality of this job in the year 1700. We aren't talking about a modern executive sitting in an ergonomic chair looking at a spreadsheet.
Right. There is no accounting software. There isn't even a calculator.
There's no fast travel either. Conducting an 8-day financial review meant physically walking or riding across a massive agricultural estate.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the physical scale of it.
Exactly. It meant standing in the cold pantries, cross-referencing raw sacks of flour with the number of baked loaves to ensure the baker wasn't skimming.
Yeah.
It meant personally inspecting the butcher's scales, mediating screaming matches between scullery maids, and doing all the arithmetic by hand, by candlelight, late into the night.
So it's literally an extreme endurance event.
Completely. Given the medical care and the physical toll of life back then, a 50-year-old might literally have aged out of the stamina required for this relentless, exhausting micromanagement.
That is wild.
They are buying the prime physical and mental energy years of a highly capable manager. You need someone old enough to have outgrown foolishness, but young enough to actually survive the workload.
That paints such a vivid picture. And it sets up a really interesting dynamic, because if the intendant is guarding the vault, who is guarding the secrets?
Ah, yes, the secretary.
Right, which brings us to Chapter 7. The manual is very clear that the secretary must adhere to the exact same strict moral standards as the intendant. No gambling, no vices.
None.
Why is the guy who just writes letters held to the same intense moral standard as the guy controlling all the money?
Because the Lord's next biggest vulnerability isn't his vault, it's his correspondence.
Ah.
The secretary is the ultimate information gatekeeper. If you control the flow of information, you control a massive amount of hidden power.
He's essentially the head of IT security and communications.
Yes. He knows the Lord's private affairs, the political maneuvering, the debts, the secret alliances,
Everything.
everything. In an era where information was a highly valuable commodity that could be sold to rivals or used for political blackmail, a secretary with a drinking problem or a gambling debt is a catastrophic security risk.
Wow.
The manual treats information leaks with the exact same severity as financial theft.
Which perfectly highlights the overarching theme here, right? The sheer paranoia of the aristocracy.
Oh, it drips from every page.
You have these immensely wealthy lords living in palaces, but the entire manual reads like a survival guide against internal grift. Let's look at the physical assets in Chapter 8. We mentioned the Ikur, the master of the horse who makes 400 leaves. His job description is remarkably hands-on.
Yeah, he's not just issuing directives from a plush office. The manual dictates he must be down in the dirt.
Right, Audiger says the Ikur must get up early, personally check the horse's hooves, and oversee the daily feeding. And the feeding instructions are insanely specific.
Oh, the oats.
Yes. He has to stand there and ensure the horses eat their hay before they are given their winnowed oats. Why? Audiger says it's to prevent waste. But surely a few spilled oats don't matter to a billionaire lord.
Well, it wasn't about the horses being ticky eaters. It was about the black market.
Wait, a black market for horse food?
Yes, we have to understand the mechanisms of theft in this era. Hay is incredibly bulky. A stable boy can't easily steal a bale of hay and walk off the estate unnoticed.
Right, that would be pretty obvious. But oats?
Oats are tiny, dense, and untraceable. They were effectively the cryptocurrency of the 18th century black market.
That is hilarious.
It's true. A stable hand could easily slip a pouch of winnowed oats into his coat every single day and resell them in the village. If the horses fill up on the high-value oats first and leave the bulky hay, the leftover hay rots.
Right.
But if you force them to eat the hay first, any leftover oats can be easily scooped up, pocketed, and fenced.
So what does this all mean? The Equuyers is standing there at dawn, making a massive 400-lever salary, essentially watching the horses eat just to make sure his own staff isn't embezzling the grain supply.
Exactly.
It's like a modern VP of logistics personally inspecting the delivery trucks every single morning to make sure the drivers aren't siphoning gasoline out of the tanks.
It highlights a very real economic vulnerability. These estates were constantly bleeding from 1,000 tiny cuts. A stable boy stealing oats, a kitchen maid slipping a cut of meat to her family, a corrupt butcher overcharging by a few coins. At the scale of these households, those tiny, continuous leaks would literally sink the ship.
And we see that exact same iron-fisted control in the kitchen in Chapter 13. The maître d'hôtel, our highest-paid executive, is given the explicit authority to hire and fire kitchen staff on the spot to maintain strict order.
Right. He is the absolute dictator of the kitchen precisely because the food budget was one of the easiest places to hide theft.
It completely reframes how you view these opulent estates. They weren't just places of endless carefree luxury. They were fortresses constantly under siege from within.
Exactly. The wealth was vast, but it was highly illiquid and incredibly fragile if it wasn't perfectly regulated.
Okay, so you've built this intense internal fortress to protect your money, your secrets, and your grain. But you still have to interact with the outside world, right?
You do.
And how does a paranoid, tightly regulated house deal with the public? They do it through their frontline gatekeepers.
The unsung heroes.
Let's talk about Chapter 20. The Suisse, or portier basically, the doorman.
Yeah, the Suisse is a vital role, standing at the literal threshold of the estate.
Audiger dictates that the Suisse must know how to read and write so they can maintain a log of every single visitor. They even have to keep the doors locked during Mass. But here is the detail that absolutely blew my mind.
The legal documents.
Yes. The Suisse is specifically responsible for receiving legal documents, what Audiger calls exploits and assignations, basically legal subpoenas. They are trained to intercept process servers to avoid surprise lawsuits against the Lord.
They are acting as a literal legal shield for the family.
I have to admit, I was so confused by this. I mean, if you are a powerful, incredibly wealthy French lord, shouldn't you be somewhat above the law? Why are you so terrified of a process server that you need your doorman trained in legal interception?
Well, this raises an important question. Why so much paranoia? You'd think their power made them immune, but the reality of the French aristocracy was much messier and, frankly, much more stressful. Oh, yeah. They were deeply, relentlessly litigious. They sued each other over land borders, over inherited debts, over perceived slights to their honor.
And I imagine they spend a lot of money they didn't actually have.
A tremendous amount. Many nobles were land rich but cash poor. They were constantly leveraging their estates to fund those extravagant 500-livre dinner parties we talked about earlier.
Ah, so the creditors were always knocking.
Creditors and merchants were always trying to collect. If a process server managed to slip through the front gates and formally serve a document to the lord or his immediate family, it could trigger a massive, deeply embarrassing, and financially ruinous legal battle.
So the front door isn't just about keeping out riffraff. It is a legal firewall against financial collapse.
Exactly.
The lord is inside throwing banquets with pheasants to project invincibility to his rivals, while his doorman is physically blocking the repo man at the gate. The sheer anxiety of living like that.
The facade of wealth had to be maintained at all costs, which required constant, exhausting vigilance at every single entry point.
And we see that same vigilance applied to the most mundane objects inside the house, too, in Chapter 15.
The napkins.
The napkins.
Yeah.
Take the garçon d'office, the staff member who manages the silver and the linens. Auditor makes it an absolute ironclad rule. The garçon must ensure that a dirty napkin is returned before he ever hands out a clean one.
Yeah, a strict one-for-one exchange.
Again, we see the absolute terror of the 1,000 tiny cuts. But it's a napkin. You have enough money to employ a master of the horse, and you are terrified someone is going to walk off with a napkin.
Well, we have to remember the economic context before the Industrial Revolution. Textiles were not cheap, disposable goods.
True, no mass production.
Exactly. Fine linen was incredibly labor-intensive to produce and prohibitively expensive. A silver spoon or a high-quality linen napkin was a serious capital asset. And more importantly, it was untraceable if it walked out the back door.
Just like the oats.
Exactly like the oats. The garçon d'office is running a high-security inventory system. If you didn't enforce that strict one-for-one exchange, the household's assets would simply evaporate into the local village economy over the course of a year.
It's the 18th century equivalent of checking out a laptop from the IT department.
Yeah.
You absolutely do not get the new MacBook until you physically hand over the old one, because the company knows those things will just disappear.
It's the exact same principle of asset protection, just applied to dinnerware.
When you lay it all out like this, the shiny illusion of the aristocratic estate totally shatters. It's not a fairy tale at all. It's a high-stakes corporate environment filled with micromanagement, security risks, and budget paranoia.
And I think that's the true value of reading a document like La Maison Reglée. It strips away the mythology and shows you the raw operational mechanics of human beings trying to manage other human beings.
Which brings us back to you listening right now. Because this wasn't just a house, it was a self-contained economy.
Yeah.
And when you look at your own workplace, your own organization, or even how you manage your own household budget, you are going to see the exact same struggles Auditor was documenting 300 years ago.
The technology has evolved, sure. We use spreadsheets instead of handwritten ledgers, and we worry about data breaches instead of stolen notes. But the fundamental challenges are static.
Right.
Establishing a clear hierarchy so people know who is actually in charge. Implementing systems to prevent waste. The desperate search for trustworthy managers who won't gamble the budget away.
And perhaps most importantly, designing a system that protects the organization from our own natural human flaws. Auditor didn't trust anyone. Not the baker, not the stable boy, not even his own CEO.
He built a machine designed to survive the people operating it.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as you navigate your own modern regulated house. We spent a lot of time looking at how Auditor's payroll, 500 livre for the party planner, 200 for the spiritual guide, revealed what that society truly prioritized, regardless of what they claimed to value on Sundays.
It makes you wonder, if someone wrote a manual for your life or your workplace right now, and a historian 300 years in the future were to dig up your budget, your payroll, and your strict daily rules, what would they conclude?
Oh, that's a good question.
What would your specific discrepancies and security measures reveal to them about what you truly value versus what you just say you value?
Definitely something to think about the next time you have to return a dirty napkin to get a clean one, or, finally submit that expense report you've been putting off. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of La Maison Reglée. It's been an absolute blast unpacking this with you. Until next time, keep diving deep.